After the success of the original Disney Infinity, Disney remembered how much they loved making money.
Hello, I like money.
So a little over a year later, Disney Infinity 2.0 was unleashed upon the world. The game was once again developed by Avalanche Software, with Heavy Iron Studios handling the Windows, iOS and Android ports. Today we will be focusing on the main version of the game, so not the mobile ports, although there's definitely some interesting content to be found there. So today we will be looking at the 3 playsets, as well as the 4 Toybox adventures, as well as any additional characters. Now before we go any further, now is the perfect chance for you to subscribe. If you enjoy Disney Infinity, Disney games, movie tie-in games, so on and so forth, this channel will be perfect for you, so why not hit that subscribe button and tap that bell for notifications. So without further ado, let's start off with the base playset, and that is the Avengers. Now I'm just going to start off by saying, if you didn't enjoy the more combat focused levels in the first Disney Infinity, so like the Incredibles, this game probably isn't for you, because most of Disney Infinity 2.0 is superhero based combat. Anyway, so the Avengers playset is more based off of the Avengers Assemble TV show that aired on Disney XD here in the UK. It was a cartoon designed to capitalise off the success of the first Avengers film. That is made abundantly clear here in this playset, because the villain of the playset is Loki, who is of course the villain of the first Avengers film. Joining Loki is a slightly lesser known villain called MODOK, who has turned into the complete laughingstock of the Ant-Man franchise.
My name is Darren, and I am not a dick!
And they are freezing New York and invading with the Frost Giants. Now, for those of you that bought the Disney Infinity 2.0 starter set, you got Iron Man, Black Widow and Thor within the set, and the additional characters you could then purchase were Captain America, Hawkeye, Hulk, the Falcon and Loki. Now, something really cool that these 3 Marvel sets do is they have crossover characters, so characters from different sets that, after you collect so many of their tokens in that world, you can play as them and get special missions especially for that character. So in the Avengers playset, the 2 crossover characters are Rocket Raccoon from the Guardians of the Galaxy playset and Nova from the Spiderman playset. Now, of course, the previous Disney Infinity playsets were all based off of fictional places. This, on the other hand, rebuilds New York within Disney Infinity. And just for reference, this is 4 times larger than the Incredibles playset, so it's definitely a much bigger superhero experience. Now, as someone who very much so enjoys Marvel, the MCU, the comics, the TV shows, all of it, this game was right up my street. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. It's still very button mashy, it's still very samey, but I did have a really good time. There isn't really a 3D open world Avengers game out there where you can just fly about as each of your favourite characters or drive around as whoever can't fly. That just doesn't really exist, so being able to do it within Disney Infinity is a really cool gimmick. And to add to the immersion, if you are a big fan of the Avengers Assemble TV show, pretty much all of the Avengers from the show have their voice actors in this game as well. And on top of that, Samuel L. Jackson comes back to voice Nick Fury. Just a fun little fact for you, Yuri Lowenthal is the voice of the Toybox narrator in this game, and he actually goes on to voice Spider-Man in the PlayStation Spider-Man series. I just thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, so in terms of missions, it is all quite samey. There'll be big blocks of ice you have to break up, and then as you break them, Frost Giants spawn, you fight the Frost Giants, rinse and repeat. This happens quite a few times. There's a cool few little set pieces like rescuing a bus off of a bridge, assisting an armed convoy, and there are a couple of boss fights as well, so it is a pretty cool game. But if you get bored of this kind of combat quite easily, then I hate to break it to you, you're not going to enjoy this. Okay, so next up we have the Spider-Man playset, which again is based off of the cartoon that was airing around the same time, Ultimate Spider-Man, which features Drake Bell voicing Spider-Man, as he does in this game. Anyway, so the other playable characters in this set are Nova, Venom, Iron Fist, Nick Fury, and Green Goblin. And again, we've got 2 crossover characters here, and this time we've got 2 Avengers, we've got Iron Man and Hulk. This playset was sold separately and didn't come with any version of the game, so with the playset you got Spider-Man and Nova, and then all the other figures you had to buy separately. Now, before I actually talk about the playset itself, I do just have to say how horrendous the design for Green Goblin in this era of Spider-Man was.
Holy God, what are you showing me? His head. Come on.
I really don't like this Green Goblin. Give us Willem Dafoe Green Goblin, because this version just isn't it. The figure's naff, and the design in the cartoon and this game was just rubbish as well. Now, rants aside, it's very, very nice to get a figure for Venom. That's very cool, and I'm pretty sure this figure sold very well, because Disney did not expect it to do as well as it did. Anyway, so the story of this playset sees Green Goblin and Mysterio holding Venom hostage and testing on him, and then they unleash symbiotes across the city. So Spider-Man, Nova, Iron Fist, along with Nick Fury, team up with Venom to stop these symbiotes. The playset starts with a tutorial, which none of us actually needed because we've all played the game by this point, but I do have to give credit to this tutorial because it was a very cool set of set pieces with Mysterio. And it's nice to see a Mysterio that actually has powers and isn't just using garbage drones like in Spider-Man Far From Home, but that's besides the point. It was just a pretty cool intro to the game. Now, my biggest fear going into this playset was how was Spider-Man going to feel to control in terms of swinging. And it's fine, it's better than I thought it was going to be, I'll say that. It's not quite on par with our current run of Spider-Man games on the PlayStation, but it is better than some that we've seen in previous games. There's no realism to it at all, obviously attaching to buildings or whatnot, but that's absolutely fine. This is a kid's sandbox game. Now, the biggest challenge that the Spider-Man playset faced going in was the fact that this was once again just set in New York City, so there was no real new map design to add in. So in an attempt to make up for this, quite a lot of the game takes place within some labs, and to be honest with you, I'd rather it just take place in New York, to be honest, because these lab sections are just so boring. There seems to be this thing with Spider-Man games where they break up the main gameplay with something else going on. Now, don't get me wrong, the gameplay within these lab sections is still fairly similar, but having Spider-Man contained to these small rooms is just kind of boring to me. The whole fun of Spider-Man is swinging around, making the most of your environment, and just doing that in such a confined area is just so dull. However, you shouldn't let these lab sections put you off, because aside from these, this is still a really fun playset with some pretty cool characters to go in. I kind of thought Nick Fury was a bit of a weird and bland choice of character to put in, but I guess when you've got the voice of Samuel L. Jackson in your game, you're going to make the most of it. However, I do think it would have been nicer to have one of the other more prominent characters from the Ultimate Spider-Man TV show, like White Tiger, Luke Cage, or Black Cat, someone like that. But it's absolutely fine. It's still cool to have Samuel L. Jackson in a video game. Okay, so for our third and final Disney Infinity 2.0 playset, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, the actual story of this playset is very heavily inspired by the first film, featuring an invasion from Ronan, and the Guardians getting the stone to the Collector. However, the voices of these characters and the designs are actually from the Guardians of the Galaxy TV show that was airing at the same time as Avengers Assemble and Ultimate Spider-Man. All three of these were part of the same universe on Disney XD, which is pretty damn cool to be honest. So in the Guardians set, there are a total of 7 playable characters. The first 2 are Star-Lord and Gamora, and they came included with the playset when you bought the level. The other remaining 5 are Drax, Groot, Rocket Raccoon, and then we have Ronan the Accuser and Yondu. Now, Rocket Raccoon was one of Disney Infinity's best-selling figures. I remember trying to get this one and it just being sold out everywhere every time I tried to get it. There are also 2 crossover characters in this level as well, and those are Nova and Iron Man. And that makes Iron Man a crossover character in both Disney Infinity playsets that he is not originally a part of, which is pretty damn cool and testament to RDJ's performance of Iron Man, and just the iconic status that he took Iron Man to. The Guardians playset gets immediate bonus points from me for just not being set in New York. This is set on Nowhere, which is actually a severed celestial head, which is pretty damn cool and was in the Guardians of the Galaxy films. Anyway, so in terms of gameplay, yeah, it's kind of similar to the Avengers and Spider-Man 1. There's a little bit more going on here, just on account of the fact that it's in space. There's a couple of on-the-rails shooter moments, which is kind of cool. And depending on the character you play as, you can kind of turn this into a third-person shooter, rather than just a brawler. Now, I started the game playing as the base character Star-Lord, which was a nice mix of both. You've got his blasters, but he also does have some fairly cool combat. I then switched it up to Rocket Raccoon, thinking, oh, he's the most popular character for a reason. I'm going to be real, early on in the game before you level him up, he's probably one of the worst characters to play as because he's only got a really slow firing semi-auto blaster. His single attack doesn't even combo, it's just a little charge through people. Eventually you can level this up so you get dual blasters, higher damage, different moves, but he will always only have one melee set in this level, and that is charging people. Now, in terms of difficulty, I think this might be the first time I actually had any difficulty playing a level in Disney Infinity ever. That could have been down to the fact that I swapped out to Rocket halfway through the game's story and made it a bit more challenging for myself by resetting and going back to a level 1 character. And there's these convoy missions where Yondu's flying this very slow-moving craft and you have to make sure he can get through. And the enemies spawning are just ridiculously overpowered and it takes so many shots to kill them that I actually had to restart a couple of times. But I got there in the end. Now, although this does take a lot of inspiration from the films, it's very cool to see some comic book references in here as well. The chief security officer of Nowhere is Cosmo, the Russian dog. Don't get me wrong, Cosmo does eventually appear in Guardians 3, but this didn't come out for a long time after this game. Again, the character design is kind of a mixed bag. Some of them look really good. Cosmo looks really weird. I don't know what it is about him, he just looks odd. The same with Drax, his arm movements are just a bit strange. He's closer resembling his comic book counterpart rather than the movie, but just the actual design of the figure itself is just a bit But needless to say, some slightly poor design does not stop this playset from being a pretty good time. If you are a big Guardians fan, don't get me wrong, there's already a really good Guardians of the Galaxy game now, but this is definitely still worth checking out. Personally, I would say this is probably my favourite playset out of the 3 Marvel ones for Disney Infinity 2.0. They're all pretty good, but I think this one just takes the win by just a small margin. Okay, so next up we have 4 Toybox Games. Now, Toybox Games are a new thing to Disney Infinity 2.0. They're little smaller levels featured around different characters and themes, which is pretty damn cool. Now, the biggest shame of the Toybox Games in 2.0 is that there are only 4 of them, and 2 of them are Marvel related, which I have to say is quite disappointing because you added characters from Tron and Big Hero 6. They both could have easily had their own Toybox Games rather than there being another Guardians level and another Avengers level. We didn't need them. Anyway, so the first Toybox level I played was Escape from the Kiln, which is like the prison in Guardians of the Galaxy. This turns the game into a kind of semi-top-down dungeon crawler combat game, which is pretty cool. It took a little bit of getting used to because the camera is unnecessarily sensitive and a bit awkward to control. It introduces the sidekick gimmick, and the sidekicks are all those little figures from the first Disney Infinity game, but you can go through, collect loot for them, upgrade their armor, upgrade their weaponry, and their ability to find more loot. Honestly, when I first started playing this, I thought, oh god, this isn't going to be for me, but then I kept playing and I actually started to enjoy it quite a lot. It was a nice change up from the generic Disney Infinity gameplay I'd experienced up until that point. Don't get me wrong, it's still quite a lot of the same combat, just from a different perspective. But to have a dungeon crawling level in a Disney Infinity game, to me, just seemed very cool. Anyway, so Escape from the Kiln had set the bar fairly high for me, so next I moved on to Brave Forest Siege, which of course is about the Disney film Brave. This is the first level in 2.0 that I had played that wasn't themed around Marvel characters, so it was nice to get to play as someone from outside the Marvel universe. The only Brave figure in the game is Merida herself, which is absolutely no problem at all, because I'd honestly be hard-pressed to tell you another character from that film they could have justifiably made a figure out of that would have sold at all. Anyway, so I was expecting something cool, something Brave-themed, and don't get me wrong, the level is Brave-themed, but it's literally just a reskin of Escape from the Kiln. It's another dungeon crawler with a sidekick, and you work your way through the levels, getting keys, getting loot, and leaving, and that's it. Pretty cool, but there's no need to play both, because once you've played one of them, you've played both of them. Merida herself controls pretty well, and her bow and arrow ricochets in a similar vein to how the Lone Ranger's gunshots did in the first game, which is pretty cool, and you can upgrade that so it becomes quite overpowered quite quickly, just spamming the bow and watching it bounce from enemy to enemy. Anyway, I didn't play loads and loads of this because, as I said, it was exactly the same as Escape from the Kiln. So, with slightly lower hopes than I'd had previously, I moved on to the next Toybox game, which is Assault on Asgard. So you can play as any of the Avengers for this level, but I chose to play as Thor, A, because it's on Asgard, and B, because I'd already played as him loads in the Avengers playset, so I'd already earned a load of XP and upgraded his skill tree quite a lot. Now again, I was very pleasantly surprised with this level, as it turns out to be a tower defense game, which again is probably one of the last genres I would have expected to have seen in a Disney Infinity game. You can place turrets and traps and so on and so forth, and the enemies will come from different directions, and you have to guard Asgard from the Frost Giants. You can fly around, do your usual combat. It's not top-down, it's just standard third-person combat that we've come to see from Disney Infinity, but the tower defense part is pretty cool. There's also those little minifigure AIs going around, and you can also rescue them for extra points and loot, which is pretty cool. Now, I didn't play all of the levels of Assault on Asgard, but of all the ones I played, they were all 10 wave levels, which is perfect. They don't overstay their welcome, it lasts the right amount of time. It's about 10 to 15 minutes depending on how quickly you clear the waves. Overall, it's a pretty good idea, fairly decent design, and to be honest, for all these Toybox games, it's a nice way to be able to level up your characters outside of the playset, or in the generic toy box. Anyway, so again, I was riding on the highs of Assault on Asgard, so I moved on to the fourth and final of the Toybox games, and that is Stitch's Tropical Rescue. And honestly, I was actually most excited for this because I knew I finally was going to get the chance to play as Stitch, but given the pattern of the first two levels, I probably should have expected this. This is another tower defense game, exactly the same as Assault on Asgard, except this time you play as Stitch, or you can choose one of the many other outside of Marvel standard Disney characters like Donald Duck or Merida or Aladdin, so on and so forth. Kinda cool, I guess, but once I'd already done Assault on Asgard, I just wasn't interested in doing this again. The same logic applies. You have turrets, you have traps, you can rescue the AI for extra points, and they are 10 wave-based levels, so still very cool. I just wish I'd played this one first before Assault on Asgard because I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Anyway, Stitch himself is a pretty cool character to play as. He's quite quick, his combat is very fast, he's got his blaster, you can upgrade that to have 2 blasters, kind of similar to Rocket, except this time he actually has some good melee combos as well. Anyway, that takes us to the end of the Toybox game, so finally I have the remaining characters that do not either have a Toybox themed level or a playset. So in this section I will not be discussing the Marvel characters or Stitch or Merida. Okay, so first up we have Donald Duck. Now I'm very surprised there was such little Mickey Mouse franchise representation in the first game, and my surprise continues here. Across all 3 Disney Infinity games there's not one single playset themed around Mickey Mouse, and Donald is the second character from the franchise to get representation by the second Disney Infinity game. He's got a very cool design. He throws cartoony things like vases, boots, so on and so forth as his projectile attack. He just has very standard melee combat. Overall, pretty standard figure, nothing too exciting, but it's nice to see some Mickey representation in the game. Although it is important to note that the Sorcerer Mickey Crystal version of the figure did launch once Disney Infinity 2.0 had launched. It was not during the original game. So technically you could argue there were 2 Mickey franchise figures from this game, but not really. Okay, so next up we have Aladdin, who has a pretty nice design that resembles him from the film. The cartoon, not the Will Smith live action one. In terms of combat, I'm not gonna lie, he's kind of boring. He has a sword, and he can also throw the sword as a projectile. That's literally all there is to him. This is again another franchise I'm surprised didn't have a Toybox game or some little more representation, because Jasmine is also in this game, but that's fine, we can just make our own levels in the Toybox. Okay, so next up we have Tinkerbell, which is a kind of random inclusion, in my opinion, but I guess it makes sense in terms of Disney popularity. Her projectile attack is actually kind of cool. You wave the wand and it hits enemies and suspends them in animation in the air for a short period of time. It's a very cool effect, especially when you have a big load of enemies and you just do it to all of them. It's quite funny. Unfortunately, that's where my excitement ends, because her melee attack is just her waving the wand around. She can fly, of course, because she has wings. The flying around is pretty cool, so there's credit for that. Nice character design, nice figure design, moving on. Okay, so next up we have Maleficent. Now, the reason for this figure being in the game is because there was the Angelina Jolie film of the same name coming out around the same time. The design for her in this game kind of creeps me out. There's something quite uncanny about her face. I don't know what it is, it just creeps me out a little bit. However, she's a very cool character to play as. Her projectile attacks are just more magic, but they can hit very hard. Her melee attacks, again, it's kind of just more magic, but If you upgrade Maleficent, you can actually unlock her wings and fly around, and that just looks insanely cool. Anyway, pretty cool figure design, not too keen on the character design just because of the uncanny face. Personally, I think they should have gone with the original animated design rather than the live action one, because the live action characters in Disney Infinity don't work quite as well alongside their animated counterparts, but hey ho, that's fine. Okay, so next up we have Hero from Big Hero 6. I've probably butchered that pronunciation, I haven't seen that film in such a long time. Anyway, insanely cool figure and character design, I have to say. Some of the most creative attacks and projectile shots I've seen in the game. Although I guess you couldn't really describe it as a projectile because you just ride the glitchy wave and it's so cool. It just looks really well done. Why was there not a Big Hero 6 level somewhere in this game? I don't know. Which leads me nicely onto Baymax, another fantastic figure and another fantastic design. He's in his full superhero costume here, so you can fly around, which is just so much fun. Attacks-wise, projectiles is the fist, and then you just have standard melee combat. But to be honest, it's all pretty cool. You can upgrade it so you can fire quicker with higher damage. Again, I don't really have much else to say about Baymax because he's just a very cool character with a very cool design. Nothing else to really add. So moving on, we have Jasmine from Aladdin. The character and figure design are both very good and match her from the cartoon film. In terms of projectiles, she has a really random projectile attack where she kind of fires off a tornado that is produced by the magic carpet, which I just think is quite funny, and then she just has very standard melee combat. Pretty cool and random character to include alongside Aladdin, which is nice to see them in the game. It's just a shame they don't have more to do. And now for our final two characters. Both of these are from the Tron franchise, having appeared in the more recent Tron Legacy. I am a huge fan of the Tron franchise, although as middling as it can be with Legacy, I wish there'd been a Tron level, even a Toybox game in Disney Infinity, more than any other franchise that's in this game. So first up we have Sam Flynn, and all of his melee attacks affect the enemies in ways that you would expect them to, and show off effects from the Tron series. Of course, he has the light disc as a projectile, and you can charge it up and it bounces off more enemies and goes further. It's very cool. There were, of course, the power discs you could get in this game that then unlocked you the light cycle and other Tron vehicles as well, so there is a fair bit of Tron content in this game. Finally, for our second Tron character, we have Korra. I think that's the correct pronunciation. Honestly, I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen the film. Her melee attacks are with her sword, and the projectile is her throwing that sword. Both of the character and figure designs for these two Tron characters are really nice, and I really wish I'd bought them when the game was out. In fact, I might still have to buy them after I've made this video, just to put them on a shelf somewhere to display. Now that takes us to the end of our look at Disney Infinity 2.0. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment down below what your favourite Infinity character is. If you'd like to see more content on Disney Infinity, I'd love to know. As always, thank you very much for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe, tap that bell for notifications, and that just leaves me to say, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.